back to Beating a Dead Horse. As always, I am your host, Sean McKinda.
And I'm your host, Jackson Keller.
And this week, we're changing directions. And that is provided you have only listened to the week prior's episode where we talked about Detroit Become Human, because this is way more in our lane, because we're going to talk about Knives Out.
I mean, is there anything more in our lane than a David Cage game about Chappie?
I mean, that's fair. Like, when you get into like the very ethos of the podcast, Detroit Become Human is everything. But like when you get in like the actuality of like what we're normally talking about, it's far closer to something like Knives Out.
This is true. This is one. We were both pretty excited to see this one for a variety of reasons, and it definitely from the trailers screamed like my type of thing that I would enjoy. So I mean, let's figure out how that turned out. Sean, what did you think of Knives Out?
I really enjoyed it. I don't know that it's necessarily going to stick out as like one of my all-time favorites of the year. I'm finding myself gravitating more and more to the weird shit. But I also still really, really liked it. I had a great time with it. People talk a lot about the final shot, and I see why. I thought the final shot was quite excellent. Rian Johnson is absolutely incredible when it comes to visual filmmaking and visual storytelling. There's a bunch of just like little things to it that like very much blink and you'll miss it type moments that are absolutely fantastic. I loved a lot of what they did with it. The mystery itself felt very much like pulpy. Like I watched a shit ton of Psych as a kid. I loved Pushing Daisies. I watched a shameful amount of Bones. So like it felt very much like something out of that, more akin to like Psych or Pushing Daisies, of course, given that Bones is far more self-serious. But like it had a very much conventional murder mystery attitude to it, but like with some fun to it, which I really liked. So I had a good time with it. It felt very. I feel like a good way of putting it is consumable. Like, it's a movie that I watched, I enjoyed, I had a hell of a time with it. Parts of it are going to stick with me, but a lot of it does feel very much like, I consumed it, I'm done now. Time to move on with my life. Which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's not like it's a mediocre or subpar movie by any stretch of the imagination. I do highly recommend it. I'm worried about its staying power.
Yeah, consumable is a good word. I think that sums up my pretty conflicted reaction fairly well, because there was a lot that I really liked about this movie in terms of the visuals, in terms of like having fun, wacky characters, in terms of performances, in you know, just setting, you know, shot construction, like all of the tangible details of the movie.
How can they be tangible if it's a movie? No, that was a stupid fucking joke. Cut this. That was stupid by my standards.
That was, I don't know what that was. But so all of that stuff was good, even great. I had a lot more problems with the script, for reasons that are kind of complicated, and I think difficult to discuss without spoilers. It is like a mystery, so it's very difficult to discuss without spoilers in general, I think. But if I had to say whether or not I would recommend it, I think I ultimately would say yes. The elements that were good and fun enough to mostly hold my attention. But if I had to describe like the broad strokes of my engagement with this movie, I was extremely engaged in the first couple of scenes, like about the first act. I got kind of bored in Act 2 for reasons I can't really describe without spoilers. And then I was relatively satisfied by the conclusion, but still had some problems. And I think that's about about all I can say without getting into the nitty-gritty details.
I mean, normally we do try and extend out our pre-spoiler discussion to a longer period, but like knowing what I know, seeing the trailers and whatnot, and how that sets everything up, I am kind of struggling to talk about things pre-spoilers.
I mean, I think especially with this movie, like, because we didn't mention this in the pre-discussion, but you're right. Like, the trailer definitely creates a certain kind of expectation for what the movie is, and whether or not it meets that expectation, I think, is something of a point of contention between us that's hard to talk about without spoilers.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing here. We're definitely butting heads with spoilers pretty hard. And like, even when I was just thinking about, like, oh, I could talk about the trailer a little bit, and then I'm like, can I though? Because I'm just there's a lot of little things to it. Like, it would be very much broad strokes elements that I'd even be talking about, but like, even that could arguably be considered a spoiler for this movie, just because it's a murder mystery. You know, everyone, the idea is to go in as blind as possible, which I do recommend. Like, if you've seen the trailer, that it's done a very adequate job of hiding your twists and turns and like keeping whodunit from you. So, hey.
Yeah, this is not a trailer that ruins the movie. Something that I feel like is very common nowadays. I don't know if it's more common than it used to be, but like, all I can remember is the Terminator Genisys trailer revealing that John Connor was a Terminator, which was like the big hook of the movie.
Yeah, I have not seen Genisys, but I remember you talking about that too. That, I can't believe they've done that. I mean, to be like even more relevant, like, I know, as I said, we've got nothing to talk about this movie pre-spoilers, so we're just gonna fucking shoot the shit for a couple minutes here. They just did that with the new Star Wars game from EA, Fallen Jedi or Jedi. I don't even remember what the fuck it's called.
Yeah.
But apparently the Thanksgiving TV spot for it like revealed a major plot twist in it, and like, great, way to go, guys.
Like, how does that happen? Like, I know that trailers are outsourced. Like, the people in charge of the movie or the game don't make the trailer. But, like, how does no one in, like, upper management at these trailer houses say, hey, how about we don't spoil the entire movie?
Hey, we have at least 45 minutes to fit that 90-minute feature-length film of, you know, pre-midway content. Can't we just pull 2 minutes from that or something? Or like, even like post 45 minutes, like, there's got to be like reaction shots and shit we can pull from, right? We don't need to like show the character die. Oh, we have to show that character dying. Why? Because you want to. Oh, okay, yeah, I guess we're gonna show that character dying then. Steve asked for it. You know what? Steve demanded it. And
fucking Steve.
Fucking Steve, man. He's spoiler Steve. I'll tell you what, that guy, one day we'll get him.
Spoiler Steve is actually like a white, like you know, like from Game of Thrones, like an ice zombie.
I thought you were talking about like a white person.
No,
which I mean, he's also yes. Like, it sounds like a white dude.
He is a white. And he has been working in trailer houses since the first one established, and he has had a hand in every trailer that has ever spoiled the movie. Why they keep hiring him, even though his nose has receded completely, everything is decayed, and Steve's still making trailers. What an undeath. I don't know why they keep doing this, but there he is.
This has been Nonsense with Sean and Jackson. Thank you for tuning in. Let's talk about this fucking movie.
Let's talk about spoilers. Enough about fucking Steve.
Before we do, we're going to continue with the Rian Johnson train. And next week, we're going to revisit the first two of the new Star Wars trilogy. That is The Last Jedi and The Force Awakens. I said that backwards, but pretend I didn't. So we're gonna be diving into those just ahead of the movie release. Admittedly, when it goes out, it'll be like the day before the movie comes out. But we're gonna have like a week in between there, just because there's another movie coming out in between there that we want to talk about. So come back next week as we talk Star Wars again, like every other fucker on the internet. But it's Star Wars discourse season. If you're not part of the discourse, what are you doing?
If you're not part of the discourse, you may as well be in your grave.
Unlike Steve.
All right, fuck. Where do we want to start with this one?
I mean, I think a good starting place is just given that we were talking about the trailer and the differences there. Like, do we just kind of want to talk about like what the trailer presents the movie as and how it ends up like actually playing out?
Yes, because this is one of our fundamental disagreements on the genre of the movie. Even
Well, see, I don't even know that this necessarily would dive into the genre as much as like the setting, because the trailer to me gives a very big Clue vibe, which is
yes,
not
it does.
a conventional murder mystery. And I think like when we start diving into that, like the pre-discussion happened like 15 minutes ago, and I've been marinating on this for a little while now and trying to figure out where our disagreement comes from. And I think part of that is like I have just seen so much like murder TV shows and shit that like this formula is very much part of that. So
okay, all right.
I think because like Clue does not, despite what the trailer would have you believe, because the trailer for me gives a very much a big like this all takes place over the span of one night while everyone is trapped inside a house type of vibe.
Yes,
and the movie is not that at all. Especially like the trailer, like even with like, I have been wanting to call Toni Collette Tippi Hedren for months now, and I don't know why. I can't.
You did
shake
it
that
when we
connection.
talked about Hereditary and Midsummer.
Did I?
You did it there
Oh my
too,
god.
yeah.
I have those two intrinsically linked in my brain, and I don't know why.
That's amazing.
Like, you kind of get, like, you know, the various characters, Toni Collette, Michael Shannon, everybody else that is thrown within there, Jamie Lee Curtis, all of them feel very much like they would be taking on, like, the roles of, like, Professor Plum, Mrs. White, etc., 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 but they don't really, like, they still all have very distinct characters, but they're not as... It's not as frantic as Clue, I think is really what it boils down to. It's much more paced like a conventional, like I want to call it an episode of Psych, because that's not necessarily a poor description of it. It's kind of goofy, kind of wacky, and kind of pays off in a way that is very Psych-esque. So yeah, I would say it's kind of more like an episode of Psych than Clue.
So yeah, like I was definitely getting a lot of Clue vibes from this as well, and was expecting, you know, you got the my mom actually, who enjoyed the movie very much. It's been a while since we've had Autumn's opinion on the matter in the podcast, but she really loved this. She was comparing it to like an Agatha Christie novel. Like
I've seen a lot of comparisons to Agatha Christie.
Yeah, and there definitely is that, and especially from the trailer I was getting that vibe, like Murder on the Orient Express, like wacky detective in a like enclosed space in a weird locale, like solving a mystery. It's got that vibe, and that's how the trailer presents the movie, but like that is definitely not how the movie plays out. And so to be more specific, basically, and this is why I would contend that like I don't even know if I would consider the genre of the movie, like, overall to be a mystery. I don't know if we're supposed to think the mystery is that important, because if there's one thing we can say about Rian Johnson, we know he loves his bait and switches. We know from The Last Jedi he likes taking tropes and playing with them. You know, to whatever level of success, you know, open to interpretation. But, so... the movie starts off very much in that vein. You have discovering the body, you know, the maid discovers the body, and then we cut to the house, and this is my favorite stuff in the whole movie, is when the police are doing their dry, boring interviews of the family, and Daniel Craig is being wacky in the background.
It's all like quick cuts between it, like where sometimes the character they're interviewing changes in the middle of the cut type of situation, which has very much that frenetic Clue energy to it, and like is very much it's a lot of exposition dumped on you very quickly, but done in a very entertaining way, in that it doesn't feel like they're just like, this is what you need to know to get caught up to be where you are now.
It's very visual, it's very clever, it's very funny, like the way that they will, like, even the simple things.
Hey,
like
quick question for you.
Yeah.
Before I'm gonna let you keep going on that. What was him pressing the piano key doing? Like
Oh, so sorry. No, finish.
no, I was gonna say like I never really put two and two together. I'd assumed like I stopped. I forgot to pay attention to it because like I got caught up in everything else in the movie. But like because like it felt like he was doing that whenever he felt someone lied.
That's what I assumed as well, but I hadn't paid attention to it enough the first couple times he did that to verify that.
Okay, I was just curious if you had picked up on something different. Continue.
No, yeah. So, like, there's fun little stuff like that, and even just the simple things like, character making a statement representing something one way and cutting to another character, being more truthful and having a very different take on things. Like, stuff like that.
Jamie Lee Curtis and her husband were absolutely great in that.
Yeah.
Her character's husband, I should say, but...
Right. Or Michael Shannon and, my son, he's... you could say he's politically active, and then you cut to Toni Collette going, like, he's basically a Nazi.
Not basically. One of them actually calls him a Nazi.
One of them, later in the movie, they call him the masturbating Nazi, which is probably my favorite line in the whole movie. But, so that's all great and very much in line with what you would expect. And then it takes a turn because the nurse... Marta, our protagonist, as it turns out, she has been acting very, very, like, frightened, kind of looks like a deer in the headlights, and, at first, it's not, there's a little bit of wiggle room, like, obviously, this is a murder mystery, so, she could be the killer, or she could just be, like, traumatized at what's going on, or worried that people will suspect her, and then... Because in the previous scene, we had gotten extended flashbacks from all the other characters, giving them a motive of some sort. Toni Collette gets her financial support cut out from under her. Michael Shannon is getting kicked out of the family business. Jamie Lee Curtis's husband is cheating on Jamie Lee Curtis, and
God, the payoff for that is also great. Just as an aside,
payoff for that is really great. Yeah,
like this is what I was talking about. I don't know. I feel like I swear to God I mentioned it here already, but like there's a lot of visual details that like just quick blink and you'll miss it storytelling that this movie does. Where like she finds out like she realizes that her dad wrote her a secret letter. She reads the last one. It reveals that her husband's cheating on her. And then in the next scene, you don't see anything, but in the next scene, her husband has a black eye, and it's great.
Yeah, no, that was great. But after all this setup, we then move to Marta's testimony, which goes into much more detail and shows us basically the whole string of events as far as we know from that night. And now, obviously, there's more to it, but it's very thorough. And what ends up happening is we discover that Marta accidentally gave him a shit ton of morphine, or so we think. And he ends up like coming up with a plan because her mother is an undocumented immigrant, and if she goes to jail, that will put her entire family in danger, and Harlan cares for her. And so that leads to this like crazy scheme involving her, like, faking being Harlan and like scaling the side of the house like Assassin's Creed style to get into the window and all this other shit. And so from why I say for me the movie stops being a mystery, or at least in the mystery genre at this point, and I would describe it more as like a Hitchcockian thriller, is that to me the tension, like this feels like Rian Johnson playing one of his little games. This feels like cutting off Snoke's head like halfway through the trilogy before we know anything about him. Because from then on, the tension or the intrigue isn't presented as, who done it, like a mystery, because we know who done it, or at least we think we do. But the tension is is Marta going to get found out? And a lot of scenes play with that, of her like covering up the evidence, like Daniel Craig inviting her to be his little sidekick, and her like, you know, kind of covering her tracks, and Chris Evans's character confronting her in the restaurant, and, you know, her lie detector vomit, for lack of a better word, I guess.
Which is a fun device.
It is a fun device. And so from then on, I'd say for the vast majority of the movie, that's the tension. Is Marta going to get found out? And that is where I start to judge the movie as a thriller. And as a thriller, I have problems. But, Sean, you disagree with this assertion. You have a different take anyway. So I'll step off my pulpit here if you want to respond. Your rebuttal, sir.
So I actually am going to kind of, I might surprise you here a little bit. Because I was thinking about the wrong part of the movie when you said it was kind of like a thriller. And I think I kind of agree with you. Which is not what we talked about. But I think that you're definitely making some good points in that, like, when you're focused, I feel like this movie is one of those movies where there's kind of two main characters. And like they really work in conjunction the entire time. And so like it kind of becomes a blend, because on one hand, if you're focused on Marta, yes, you feel the entire movie becomes just a thriller, very Hitchcockian, as she struggles to stay ahead of the police. Kind of in the same way that, like, we as the audience are trying to stay ahead of Rian Johnson, or rather Rian Johnson's trying to stay ahead of the audience, depending on how you want to look at it, like, because we're trying to figure it out, and he's trying to, like, cover his own tracks to keep the tension of the movie high. But I feel like the other option here, too, is that, like, we know at that point as well that, like, there's more to this story to that is yet to unfold, just by the nature of the story and the advertising, despite not necessarily displaying itself as Clue, you still get the idea that there's more yet to come. Like there is still further twists yet to be revealed. So while I think this is where a lot of our divergent opinions come from. Because, you know, when we came to a fork in the road, one of us took the path that said, hey, I'm watching a thriller now, and I'm going to focus on Marta and her journey throughout that. And the other one of us said, all right, I'm going to focus on the mystery and try and piece together what else is left there. And, like, there's definitely overlap where, like, occasionally our paths will cross and we'll wave like strangers in the night. But then we'll resume on our own personal journey based on what we're focusing on. Because I continue to focus on the rest of this movie. As I said, it felt very much like a psych movie to me. Because that is what I got out of it. Like, I was more interested in Blanc's character, Daniel Craig. And so I was way more into the mystery of it and trying to, like, figure out all that stuff going on. And Marta, I felt, was more kind of the side character in this tale, despite the fact that, I mean, arguably she is the main character. But I'm a fucking sucker for mystery stuff like that. In case you didn't get that from the fact that I have watched a bunch of that shit.
Oh, don't get me wrong. I love Daniel Craig in this. I love his Colonel Sanders, like, obviously fake Louisiana accent. I love his quirky detective shtick. That stuff's great. Yeah, and so I think that's a fair assessment of the viewing experiences that we had, because then basically by that point, what I had said around the time of that scene, I had stopped thinking about it so much. I'm like, all right, Rian Johnson, you got me. You did it again, you scamp. And you know what? I'm gonna reserve making statements about Rian Johnson as a filmmaker until we revisit Last Jedi. Because I appreciate what he represents. He wrote and directed this movie. It's an original movie. It's not like a derivative schlocky blockbuster. It's kind of an old-fashioned sort of movie with a modern twist, and I appreciate that. I don't know how confident I am in his writing abilities, but I'll have to revisit Last Jedi to make a decision on that.
I mean, ignoring even, like, writing abilities and, like, filmmaking abilities, the fact that he's at least trying to take, like, consistent things and turning it on their head in the era where Disney runs rampant, making the same movie again and again with, a different coat of paint on it is refreshing, whether it works all the way or not.
I definitely agree. So we'll table that for now and let that be the statement. But as far as
next
this
week's episode's gonna be real fucking long, isn't it?
Yes, it is. We're strap in, boys. We're talking Last Jedi again.
And Force Awakens. Oh,
there's a lot.
God, yeah, that's gonna be like a 2-hour episode. Oh fuck.
But let's focus on the present for now. So what about this movie? I've mentioned that I wasn't a huge fan of the writing and I wasn't a huge fan of the script, and I think that the core problem I have with this as a thriller, as a character drama, is that Marta is too sympathetic, and that's a weird statement. I know that's a weird statement, but hopefully I'll at least make some sense. Because it's tied into a lot of things that this movie is doing with theme. There's a very heavy political bent to this that if you're not focusing on the mystery, it's a lot easier to sort of sit back and dissect.
It really is. Like, the more I think about this, like, now that I have that understanding, I completely, like, I was, that part of our pre-discussion, like, I was sitting there for a little bit. Like, at one point, Jackson finishes, like, this whole thing, and I'm like, okay. And then I just sat silently for, like, 30 seconds. I'm like, where the fuck did he see all this shit? Am I just, like, incompetent as someone who talks about film? Did I miss all of this? And, like, now that I have that understanding, I'm like, once I understood how we watched it, like, it all comes into focus. Because I completely see where you got bogged down in this stuff. Absolutely. But there was definitely a moment where I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing with my life?
What?
Oh no.
No, I totally felt the same way. I'm like, wait, what? Like, am I just going crazy? To be honest, I was worried that I was. I guess like the thing that I was worried about in the pre-discussion is that I gotta walk a fine line here because I'm going to criticize this movie's politics pretty heavily. Not so much for what it's saying, but how it's saying it and who is saying it. And I know that's something, the other thing about Rian Johnson and The Last Jedi that a lot of Last Jedi haters didn't like was that it had, like, a progressive political bent to it.
Politics in my media?
They didn't want that in their Star Wars. And I think that those people are fools, considering Star Wars has always been highly political.
Don't tell them about video games.
Let's go play a rousing, session of Metal Gear Solid, famously non-political video game. Detroit Become Human. But anyway,
it's about robots.
So like, I know, I understand that I'm veering into, like, Last Jedi hater fanboy territory here. I'm gonna try my best to make you see that's not what's going on. So I think even if, like, to tie this into Last Jedi, I think even if you're not an absolute moron who thinks your politics shouldn't be in Star Wars, I think it's fair to criticize the way that those politics are presented. And one big criticism I had of The Last Jedi that I'm sure won't change on the rewatch is the Canto Bight sequence, or, the Casino Planet, for those of you who don't know your fucking Star Wars planets.
I was gonna say, I didn't know what that was. Like, I'm like, what the fuck is a Canto Bight?
So,
you mean like a Cenobite, the thing from fucking Hellraiser? We have shot sights to show you.
So the Casino Planet
is pointless and it's input into the fucking Casino Planet. What a sight!
So this is one area. I'm just gonna say it. This is one area that I wholeheartedly agree with the idiots posting about how there's too much politics in Last Jedi. I think that the Casino Planet sequence in The Last Jedi is really bad, really cringy. And I think a big part of that is what all call white guy progressivism. It's not unique to white guys, but it's something that I notice a lot with them. I notice it a lot with white women too, but less so because obviously.
And also, as an aside, if you are joining us for the first time, hi, I'm white.
I do. Do you even have to ask from my voice, ladies and gentlemen? but no. So the thing about the Canto Bight sequence is that it's not the message that I find dumb in that movie. It's, in fact, I find it very interesting that they take the war profiteering angle in theory. But the problem is the way that it's presented is always turn directly to the camera and read a page out of your literary theory textbook in the middle of your Star Wars movie. And it just comes across as really ham-fisted, really, I'd almost call it disingenuous, because when you copy paste, the thing about copy pasting from a theory textbook is that that shows that you had to learn it from a textbook and that it's not coming from your own experience, because you are, white man making a Star Wars movie and you are in a position of extreme privilege. And so, yeah, so I find it kind of disingenuous, and I find the lack of subtlety to be a big mark against it in terms of the political messaging. And that's something that unfortunately is also very common here, especially because there isn't the Star Wars stuff to distract from it this time around. And cause, there were other things going on in that movie with the Jedi and the Star Wars franchise, and the politics were still in there, but because they were building off of something and not just turning directly to the camera, the stuff with Luke and letting go and letting new generations take over, that stuff was more resonant to me in Last Jedi. Whereas this, once the mystery is out of the way, and once I realize just how much of this movie is going to be politically focused, I start seeing a lot of those turn to the camera and read from a theory textbook moments, and I start kind of cringing. And I think that part of why I think that, to tie this back in, to why I think it detracts from my enjoyment of the movie, why I ended up being kind of bored in the middle, which is when it was at peak, covering your tracks thriller, is that by having Marta be such a innocent, pure bystander in all of this, I think that it takes away from a lot of the intrigue of the material. And I'm thinking particularly about the ending, where it can't just be that Marta got set up by switching the vials, right? It can't just be we're gonna absolve her that way because there was some machinations on the part of Chris Evans, which is a good twist. I like the way that ends up playing out. But it has to be not only was she set up, but she was so good at her job that she knew that the vials had been switched subconsciously, and that she had no role in his death at all. It's okay, dude, come on, seriously. And I think the problem with that is it feels, in terms of political messaging, it feels kind of condescending to me a little bit. Again, we have Rian Johnson, rich famous director of a fucking Star Wars movie, speaking for the oppressed underclass, and also that the other moments of the movie's political messaging feel weird to me too. So with Toni Collette's character, she's presented as almost what you'd expect from a conservative creator of a picture of a stereotypical liberal, rich, white, doesn't have a real job, just, does yoga and, sniffs her healing crystals or whatever. And, the movie makes fun of that, more clueless than anything. The parents from Get Out, basically.
Yeah, I'm going to jump off that really quick here, because there's actually a comparison. I was doing a little bit more reading as well, in between our pre-discussion and actual recording. Just kind of getting some other feelings for what people were saying about this and where the politics come in. And I was actually reading something, I think, on Roger Ebert's site, where somebody was yeah, it's a comparison to, or they made a comparison to The Dad, the I would have voted for Obama for a third term if I could have. In that this movie doesn't, I think the politics, I'm trying to think of how I want to phrase this, because there's a lot of things I want to unpack with what you're saying and kind of slot them into how I viewed the movie. So I guess what I'm going to say, first and foremost, is you mentioned that there isn't a lot of Star Wars stuff to distract it from, unless you're watching it not as a thriller but as a murder mystery, whereas then there is
Right.
everything to distract it from. You don't get bogged down in that, and it feels like they're way more just like quick little like pew 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 shots fired at things. And also like the commentary then twists away from like, hey, we have things to say about a lot from what you're getting at, and becomes much more, as I said, like just kind of quick things like, hey, rich people, they ain't so great, even if they're, you know, trying to do that faux woke thing. Like they're still not fully getting what's going on, and they'll quickly turn on people. And like,
Yes.
that's basically what the crux of this is like, hey, eat the rich, which, hey, eat the rich, but also like it's not like it's not a heavy theme by any means. At least when you watch it, I'm gonna put my foot down and say the correct way, because it sounds like your viewing experience was far worse.
I mean, it definitely was. And like, I'm being very critical. I didn't even like hate the movie or anything. I'd ultimately recommend it still, just because a lot of what was fun about it was still fun. But as far as like, you know, don't look too close. So as far as Eat the Rich, I'd say I'd agree that that's about as close as this movie has to a like consistent theme. And so here's my problem. Here's my problem with that. First, this is coming from Rian Johnson, director of Star Wars. So big problem off the bat, just from who it's coming from, because I can't help but implicitly feel like, well, Rian Johnson, by being part of this Hollywood system and making this movie, are you not being Toni Collette in your own way? And furthermore, I think that the movie,
I mean, I will say, I just out of curiosity, I did look. I just, as you're talking about this, I just looked up Rian Johnson's net worth, or like what his estimated net worth is, which plops him at approximately $5 million, which still gobs of money. Like, it's a lot of money, but as far as like the upper echelon goes, it's not the $60 million plus estate plus publishing company that they have. Like, I'm not here to defend what he's saying. I'm just saying that like $5 million could still reasonably fall in the eat the rich class pretty readily. You know, like granted they have,
I'd say so.
Yeah, they have more money than they conventionally would need, but like also we're not talking hundreds of millions, let alone hundreds of billions, which is
no. I mean, Rian Johnson is no Donald Trump, but he's definitely part of like what we would call the establishment, right? Like, and so that actually kind of gets into my the other sort of thing that maybe weirded me out a little bit, is that the movie's message is eat the rich, except the one nice rich guy, except the guy who died, who gave all his money out of the kindness of his pure heart to Marta. And I can't help but feel, again, maybe this is me playing like armchair psychologist too much, but I think it's a reasonable thing to look at a director's body of work. And I think in conjunction with The Last Jedi, which was also about like, yes, like I am nobly stepping down, like, you know, very comfortable, like, overlord of, you know, writing or of, like, the Jedi or whatever, to let the new generation, like, have everything. But I'm gonna have one last, like, badass, like, thing. I'm not gonna be completely forgotten about. Like, I'm still important. And there's kind of that element to it, too, right? Like, this element where maybe, like, eat the rich, except for the kooky old nice writer who gave everything to the, you know, working class immigrant family, i.e. maybe how Rian Johnson might see himself. And that's not fair of me to say, I know, but between that whole, like, nobly passing down a birthright and bequeathing it to someone in a marginalized position in one way or another, that seems to be a common theme between these two movies. And I find it a little condescending thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. Like, I think I can't. I don't want to say like I would if if this armchair psychology that you're diving into does end up being representing the truth, I would say that I can't necessarily fault him, just in like the idea of like we want to be remembered and we want to be seen as good, and like it feels like it's kind of like an acknowledgement of, hey, yeah, I'm part of the problem, but like I'm trying to do better, which, yeah, that's, as I'm saying it, that's real patronizing. That's not great.
So like if I could make a comparison, I think that the sections in Black Klansman where like particularly that monologue that the one activist guy has about like Hollywood as an institution, and how like the first blockbuster was Birth of a Nation, and it's like in its own way like this extremely like racist white arm of white supremacy that people don't think about as being such. So like that, the way that that's presented, like, you know, we were talking about people were arguing about that with Black Klansmen, like even within like Black communities, that, you know, is Spike Lee like being too much part of the system to make his movies? But whereas like this movie, it feels like it's playing it with kind of a straight face, like with Black Klansman, and I'd have to rewatch it again to like try and put my finger on exactly what it was. It felt like there was a lot more like wrangling with the complications and the unease of being in that position of like wanting to do the right thing but still being part of a system. And it just felt like there was more nuance to it as opposed to, you know, purely generous Harlan. And yeah, so like that's a lot of this does come down to the who is saying it, because I'm not of the opinion that, if at least I think I'm not. I think I might be, like, over the course of doing this podcast, I might be leaning more towards this way. I'm not of the opinion that you can't necessarily like write a character, even a main character, outside of the bounds of your own experience. But I think that if you're going to do that, you definitely have an uphill battle to make it feel authentic, and to make it feel like a real character, which I think that, you know, for all of the movies, like, you know, political leanings of trying to be empowering, and I think this is why I took issue with that last shot, like why I was kind of rolling my eyes, is that I think that it feels too easy to me. It feels like we're not wrangling with the political complexities so much. I think that one thing that I thought was an interesting element is that when it's obvious that Daniel Craig, like, you know, he knows from the start that Marta had something to do with it, but when he like knows as much as the audience does, and he gets a lot of sections talking about like, well, wait, maybe the truth isn't good enough, like maybe I should like protect this person even if, like, you know, she is responsible for Harlan Thrombey's death. I kind of thought that's where the movie was going, that like using his detective powers, the detective would like cast aside, like, you know, make an airtight argument against someone else who maybe wasn't necessarily responsible to protect Marta because he thinks that she deserves it, which might have its own sort of like problematic implications, but at least is more, it's more complicated ground to work with, that you could have some more nuance there as opposed to just we're gonna dunk on Nazis, which is funny the first time that it happens, but then when I realized that the movie doesn't have much more to say beyond kind of the obvious sort of cheap shots, that's when I start to get a little annoyed, especially when the movie is so overtly about its politics. And it's not always like that, to be fair. It's one of the things that keeps me from being like completely, you know, down on the movie. There are some like realistic conversations, like the way that the family interacts with Marta is like suitably Get Out level.
God,
like,
the constant switching of where she's from was great.
Yeah, so I mean, it's definitely not, Rian Johnson is not a hack. He's no dummy. But despite that, I still think I like my political movies to be a little bit more confrontational than this one, I think.
That's fair. But once again, there's a whole other way to watch this movie where it's not a political movie, but in
The
fact,
better way.
a murder mystery with some political jabs underlying it, which is just, yeah, all right. I mean, it's a very different experience, which is why I haven't really been talking that much, because I didn't get any of this. I was positive I was just a giant dum-dum.
No, I mean, I literally, it's like I can't stop. As soon as like you crack open a bottle of Themes, and I even smell it from the other side of the house, I'm gonna follow my nose. I'm gonna get to the bottom of it, even to the point of ruining the movie for me.
The movie's like, follow this path, but there's like a fucking bottle of potential thematic analysis across a field of thistle and poison ivy, and Jackson's like, I will ruin this experience for myself.
The poison's getting to me.
And that's the other thing too. We did poison the Themes as well. So even if he does get the bottle, he will still die. It's a very unfortunate situation. I do want to talk really quick just about like that final shot, because we did kind of come to the conclusion that one of us really liked it and the other one really did not. And I thought it was an incredibly satisfying final shot. It puts our main character Marta on a balcony. We have the Ransom, which, as dumb of a name as Ransom is, it is also a name that I 100% love. I fucking love the name Ransom in this movie. I thought it was a great name. But also, as he's getting taken out, the family is like looking up at her as she sits sipping coffee. And like it's the payoff to the first shot of the movie, which is where she's bringing in Harlan's mug that says "My house, my rules, my coffee." And in this scene, she's drinking it, and her fingers are covering "My rules, my coffee," so it just says "My house." And it's just such a little cute little payoff to everything that's happened so far that I really, really like it. It's very blink. It's another blink and you'll miss it type of thing, because it just kind of looks like she's, the lord of the manor to begin with, and that's clever enough unto itself. But like the fact that she just has that my house on it is just such like a little like rubbing it in their faces, like these asshole people. It's her decision. It's what she wants to do with it, and I like that quite a bit.
I was just thinking about this. I was thinking about a similar moment that didn't annoy me from BlacKkKlansman, when everyone is gathered around the phone after like the end of the movie and they're all roasting that one KKK guy.
Oh, David Duke or Topher Grace.
Yeah. Okay, it was David Duke. That's right. And it was Topher Grace as well. So I'm trying to think, like, why did I find that funny? And why did I find this so much more annoying? And like I think weirdly enough, here's my hot take. I think that BlacKkKlansman did a better job of making Klansmen look like real people than this movie did with its rich people. So it didn't feel like as easy of a shot when we're finally shitting all over David Duke, because even though he's presented as like a buffoon and like an absolute asshole and a monster, it's like the easiest shot in the world. But even then, we have seen like it's like the one scene, and I know that people have problems with this movie, but in Django, when they have the conversation, when they're all like in the hoods and they're complaining about like, did anyone bring an extra bag, like mine doesn't fit, like my wife made us these hoods, like fuck you, I'm going home. And that moment of silliness, like I think that when you're making your villains, like there's buffoonery there, but it's also weirdly humanizing in a way that I think makes them more satisfying to defeat, kind of in like a Mel Brooks sort of sense. Whereas I think I was so annoyed by the final triumph in this movie just because like it felt so easy. Like I think that it's fun in a Clue sort of movie where all the characters are kind of caricatures, like, I think that's fun. But I think if you're making a serious political statement, it just comes off as kind of easy to me. Like, we're gonna dunk on, eat the rich, okay, fine, but also, like, the elephant in the room is Ryan Johnson not gonna give any of his Star Wars money to his kids when he dies? You know what I mean? And like that, and I think the perspective is another thing too, in that in BlacKkKlansman and movies like it, when you get that sort of triumphant moment of like, we're getting one over David Duke, I mean, that's coming from a black guy, like, whereas like having the immigrant character, the immigrant teenage girl being written by rich white guy Ryan Johnson and presenting it as this big, like, I'm being super empowering moment. There's just something really annoying to me about that. I don't know what it is. Maybe I am just straight up like, white dude should only write white main characters, because I don't know if we're capable of it.
I just thought it was a really neat little bit of a clever little bit of visual storytelling. I wasn't looking that deep into it. As I said, I looked at this movie as very consumable, and was not going to spend too much time worrying about that poisoned bottle of themes.
All the themes are poison. All the themes are poison.
Yeah, no. For me, the final shot was just kind of a little satisfying victory theme. I dug it. I mean, yeah, they weren't like, they were caricatures, like the racist people, or not the racist people. Wow, I'm mixing movies now.
I mean, they were a little racist.
Yeah,
sure.
I mean, they were
casually racist.
Casual racism. I was thinking, like, my mind was on like BlacKkKlansman, so where it was fucking David Duke. But I was also trying to say rich instead of racist. So yeah, the rich / racist people, like, were they kind of caricatures? Yeah, sure. But also, who fucking cares? It was a good ending. I liked the final shot. It was a great little thing. Like the little finger thing with the My House was subtle and clever and really easy to miss in a lot of places. Like I was talking to Sam, who is pretty perceptive with that type of stuff, and she's like, "Oh, I totally missed that." So I mean, hey, you might not have seen it, and I think that's kind of clever. Is like, I like it when directors do small things like that. So that's my thought on it. It was a good episode of Psych, and there was nothing underlying it.
Only robots.
There's only robots. Do you have any final thoughts?
I feel a little bad. I just can't. I think this is speaking to something that I sort of have been struggling with in my own little world as a writer, and how to navigate this sort of like political content, especially if you are coming from a position of privilege, and like, how should you go about it, and like, what's going about it. So when I see examples that don't meet my illustrious expectations, I think I tend to get bogged down on that stuff, because like I said, I would overall recommend the movie. And I think that a lot of people who aren't like alt-right masturbating Nazis will watch this movie and find and think that, it's good that we're having this sort of like representation at all, which is also true, and like that's a valid take, and otherwise just enjoy the fun of the movie. I don't know. Like I feel kind of bad that I've been so down on this one, because I do appreciate that it is an original film. I do appreciate that it's not like a shitty action blockbuster. And I do appreciate that it's coming from like a writer-director with a vision. I can't help it if it got some problems.
That's the tagline of the podcast.
My experience is real, damn it, validate me.
All right. Well, you know what? We'll wrap it up here. We're a little bit ahead of schedule, but I feel like we're gonna make it up next week. So I've been Sean McKinda. You can find me on Twitter at Sean_McKinda. You can find me on Twitch at twitch.tv/Helpless_Skippy. And you can find my writing over at 25yearslatersite.com. I do a lot of video game writing. I'm going to try to get into more of the film critique writing as well over there. So stay tuned. I've got stuff in the pipeworks with them. I'm excited. I like writing.
Hooray! I'm Jackson Keller. You can find me over on twitch.tv/JacksonJKeller. And you know what? I'm just going to announce it here. We're shaking things up over on the Twitch channel. Necessity is the mother of invention. And so I'm proud to announce, you know what? We're just going to say it right here, right now. We're going to start a new show over on my Twitch channel called Garbage Picking, where I'm going to attempt to find the best, worst video game of all time. We're going to have a highly scientific process for finding this. Come watch me struggle through legendary classics like Bubsy 3D, Superman 64, Ride to Hell Retribution. Oh, what fun we'll have. Elf Bowling 1 and 2. It's going to be great.
Fuck, man. Fun fact about Elf Bowling 1 and 2, I played the fuck out of that game as a kid. But I played the fuck out of it as a kid when it was a free download.
When it was a Flash game.
Yeah.
That they released on the Game Boy Advance.
They released on the DS.
Oh no! So that's my new show, Garbage Picking. I think I'm not gonna make a set date, because I think the date that I wanted to start it, I'll be not in my house. So stay tuned. Garbage Picking, great show. It doesn't exist yet, but it's gonna be a great time.
And if you want to get in contact with the podcast, see what's going on, see what episodes are coming out, what episodes have come out, you can follow us on Twitter at BADH_cast. If you want to get in contact with us more directly, the best way to do that is by joining our Patreon and getting access to our Discord. For only $1 a month, you get access to our Discord where you can yell at us very easily, very directly. Just be like, your takes are bad. Here is why. And we'll take the abuse because we can. I was trying to do a Dark Knight reference there, but I realized I didn't know it off the top of my head, and so it became worse than nothing.
Sometimes the Dark Knight reference isn't good enough. Sometimes people deserve to have their faith rewarded.
If you want to give us more than $1 a month, you can give us $5 a month, and that'll get you access to our bonus episodes. We have one coming out tomorrow from when this episode goes live. We're going to be talking about Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. We haven't recorded that episode yet, so I don't know how it's going to go. But if our past episodes are any indication, it's going to be a stone cold fucking banger.
Abso-fucking-lutely. I mean, Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter is a film that I have a personal history with, actually. But I'm not going to tell you here. You're going to have to be a patron and listen to the fucking episode. So do it, you swine.
I'm gonna tease Jackson a little bit here and tell him that Roger Ebert gave it 3.5 out of 4 stars. The Roger Ebert.
The man himself, not just the people writing for his website.
The Roger Ebert gave it 3.5 out of 4 stars. So,
I mean,
just keep that in mind.
I'm genuinely shocked, actually.
The other thing that you should know is that if you give us $10 a month, you get all that. Plus, you get to request specific episodes. If you're like, hey, I really want you guys to play something stupid or watch a movie or do something like that, let us know. We'll do it. We'll play it. We're putting a time cap on it of if it's a game, it needs to be beatable in under 20 hours because we're both very busy people. But we'll do it. You also get a little something.
You also get a special shout out right here, right now. Thank you so much, Travis, Julia, Mom, Aunt Summer. Y'all are great. Thanks for supporting the show.
Absolutely wonderful, wonderful people. You know who else is wonderful? Lords of the Highway for letting us use their song Suicide Alternate Take off the album High Octane Low Expectations as our theme song. They're a wonderful band. Go support them however you can. See them live. Buy their music. Go stream them on Spotify. All that good shit. And while you're already browsing the internet, because I know you are, you should go over to 25yearslatersite.com. There's a ton of really talented people there doing a bunch of really talented writing. They recently launched a podcast. They launched a YouTube channel. They've got just everything you can imagine. Video games, wrestling, movies, TV shows, analysis, reviews, critiques, whatever the fuck you want, they're probably talking about it in some capacity.
Well, consider my dong expanded.
I was going to say what we're going to talk about next week, but now I just kind of want to end the podcast. I mean, end the podcast. Just final episode, end the podcast. But I can't do that because next week we're going to talk about Star Wars. So come back, hang out for that. I need to go put Jackson back in the timeout chair. So until then, bye.
No, Sean, not the dunce cat, please.